singing myself broken halo, golden wings that used to fly. They've all gone wherever they go, broken halos that used to shine.
Hey everybody, Master Craftsman Sam back here today. We are today doing the video on cutting the baseboard. First you'll be installing your cabinetry, get your doors hung, get your casing on, and then once you've got all three of those, now you can start on baseboard. So we'll have a lot to talk about today. It's kind of a long video, but I think it's worth it to stick through it and see how I do everything. The next video will be nailing the baseboard up, and I hope you all learned something. I hope you enjoy the video, and please like, comment, share, subscribe, and click the bell. The bell will let you know when I get any new videos out. So thank you very much for tuning in, and y'all have a great day. Alright, we're going to start here on the cutting the baseboard by taking one full piece up. We're going to give it a good side. What I mean by that is the factory edge is never trustworthy. Do not assume that when you butt something together with a factory edge that it will look good. It won't most of the time. So when you say give yourself a good side, that means just chop off one side. That's what I've done here already. So I've rough cut this board, and now I'm just going to make a pencil mark. This house has bullnose corners. Those will be very good to show you, but most of the time, like 99% of the time, you'll have a 90-degree corner, not a bullnose. So this house is a little special, but I think the principles are the same for learning how to cut any 90-degree corners. You'll have to leave out the little extra piece. I mean, there's no reason for it. You want a nice 90-degree corner instead of having 245s. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and give our, since we're going to be wanting this miter to tighten up, we're going to want it to be at 23.5 degrees. So it's there, the saw has a saw stop at 22.5. I would encourage you to budge your saw just the extra degree. Even on a 45, it should be a 46. I'm sorry, on a 90-degree corner, it would be a 46-degree cut. So that way you'll have a nice, clean looking miter. The leading edge matters the most, so make sure that leading edge is perfectly matching the other side. The way you do that is give yourself an extra 1 degree on your cut. This step that I'm doing right now is called dry fitting. I'm putting it in place, seeing how it looks. Make sure that when you dry fit, that your board is butted up against the drywall on the other side. So now we've got a piece we cut off there. So now we just use that for this side. See, I'm pointing out that that doesn't want to fit behind the casing. So what we're going to do is measure 5/8 out. 5/8 is generally how far your casing will be sitting off the wall It depends on what thickness of casing you have, obviously, though. So this is about 5/8. We're just going to roll with that. We get a mark on either side, and then you're just going to plunge down right on top of that mark, but not all the way through. Not all the way through. You want to stop short of that leading edge. You see how I did that? Right about there. And then I'm going to make another few plunges. We're going to get rid of all that material. So that way you've got just a little ear sticking off your board. Just like that. So next up, we're going to flip it this way. And we're just going to run our blade across it just a hair, just to thin it out. Get it where it'll slip right behind that casing, and you won't have a giant gap behind there. Your painter will hate you if you don't do this step. There's other ways to do it. You can always just piece a little piece in there. A lot of people do that, and that's perfectly fine. I do this because that's how I learned from my teacher. So now we're going to go put that in place. See how it looks. It looks pretty good, but it does have still about a 1/16 inch gap back behind there. You can't really see it, but sorry, the video is what it is, unfortunately. We're just going to make one more plunge, about a 1/16 of an inch, half a saw blade. That's how you can always just make a 1/16 inch cut at any time. Just use half your saw blade. Your saw blade is 1/8 inch thick. Learning stuff like that will save you time. Now we're going to make a mark straight up that curved bullnose side. Again, these walls are a little different than most houses I've seen, but we're making it work. I think this house turned out very well. So we're going to do another 23.5 inch corner, because we need an aggressive miter to close up any differences. And say that wall didn't get set with a perfect 90-degree orientation. That happens sometimes. So this will allow you to tighten up any miter. Just go into it assuming you need it, and then if you find there's gaps or whatever, you can adjust your angle just a little bit. So here I've made my 23.5 inch miter there. I flipped my board over to make the other 23.5 inch miter, and that's going to be about a 3/4 inch piece I'm putting in there, but it looks a bit long. It's not tightening up the way that I want. That's a lot of caulking that would have to go behind there. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take it back to the saw. I'm going to make myself another 23.5 degree miter right there. I'm going to take that piece, butt it up against there. Well, that's not a very good vantage point. Take that piece, butt it up against there, and offset it a little bit, just to make it a little shorter. Now we got our other 23.5 degree miter. We'll take that back to the place and see if it fits right. as I'm tightening it up, I like the way it looks. So I'm gonna go with that. And that's how you would do a bullnose corner. Now for a normal 45, or for a normal 90-degree corner, you're just gonna cut two 46-degree miters. And that's very easy. They'll just butt right up against each other. Most people are going for this modern looking trim, the double bullnose flat trim. So this will be actually most of what you'll be dealing with. MDF fiberboard trim that's got a double bullnose. There's nothing wrong with it. However, I learned to trim using a profiled hardwood trim. It's, you know, your general builder's trim. It's got a profile. It looks pretty nice, and you know, some people don't like it. They like the more modern look. So this may end up being most of what you do. In my experience, it hasn't been. Most of what I did was profiled trim with a cope joint. So right now, I would normally, with that style trim, be making a coped cut. So I will get into that eventually. I'll show you how to cope, and it's actually my favorite part of the job, is coping all those beautiful corners. You know, it was always a point of pride to walk out of a house and see all the cope joints looking very pretty. Okay, so we've got our mark. We butted it right up to that other trim. We're going to get ourselves a 23.5-degree miter right there. The pencil that I'm using is a 0.9 millimeter mechanical pencil. I highly recommend those. So we're going to get ourselves a little 3/4 inch piece to piece in our corner, and then we're going to finally get the leading edge of that one side. 23.5-degree cut here. We're going to get the other side that butts up to the casing done. That's going to be a flat cut on one side, 23.5 on the other. And we're going to grab our little piece, head back to our corner and assemble. Rather, dry fit. We're going to dry fit everything, no glue, just see if it fits. I'm liking the way it looks, so we're leaving that just like it is, I think. Maybe it needs a little bit bigger piece. So we're going to grab a piece of trim there. I'm looking for the piece that I had already cut for that other corner. It looks like it's on the ground behind the saw. Oh well, we're just going to cut a new piece. And since we don't have anything better to cut out of, we're cutting it out of a giant 16-foot board. Oh well. Be sure and make sure your saw table is always clear of debris. All those little pieces, all that dust and stuff can really throw off your cuts. Also, with casing, you're going to want to really rev up your saw's motor, but honestly, with baseboard, I probably don't rev it up hardly as much. You can see about as much as I revved that one up. So this is just a piece that I'm cutting my 3/4 inch 23.5 inch miter, or 23.5 degree miter out of. Well, it looks like maybe I did accept that that piece. Or maybe I'm coming back to it. Oh, I know what I'm doing. So what I'm doing here is I'm gonna cut a little piece off of this, maybe. No, we're just gonna go ahead and get that butted back in there. Make sure it's dry fit. Looks good. Notice how quick that was, and I didn't have to measure anything or write anything down. That'll save you a lot of time. Not writing anything down is great. It's very freeing. So now we're back to this piece again. We just needed a piece to cut it out of. Went ahead and got that other side done first. But now that I'm doing it again, honestly, it looks pretty good. I'm still not satisfied. Things obviously look different on video than they do in person sometimes. I thought that joint looked pretty good on the video. It must not have. So what I'm going to do is put that back up there. I'm going to take my little piece and I'm going to adjust how big I need it. So I'll make a mark on each side, and then I'll either cut it long or cut it short, depending on what I need. You can always make small adjustments, like a 1/16 of an inch, just with your eye. Eventually your eye will be so good that you can do those kinds of things very easily. So we're going to set our saw back to 23.5 degrees. Go ahead and make your plunge, head back, just dry fit that, make sure it fits. Of course it does. We made the necessary adjustments first. Right here we're going to need to cut a return. There's a skirt board there. The skirt boards run along the stairs and they go just up to the landing there. At the end of the landing, or at the end of the stairs rather, the skirt board ends right there and right there. And then that is baseboard that goes wrapping around there. And then it butts back in to the skirt board there. And on the other side there's a skirt board that it butts into. But when you have a skirt board that faces off like this, you will need to do what is called cutting a return. And that's what this portion is about, cutting a return. So how do we do it? We simply make a mark right where the drywall ends and the skirt board starts. But we don't make a small mark, we make it all the way across. So now we're going to do a 46 degree mitered cut. We're going to cut that line right out. I can see where the line is, and I want to accentuate it for you. We want to just get our blade riding right on down that line, and that's good. So now that piece is ready to return. So how we do that, we're going to cut a return by making a 46 degree cut. Now that we have our 46 degree cut, we're just going to plunge right alongside and make a straight cut. Now watch out, your piece will go flying sometimes. if you're not careful. Right as I'm going through, I'm kind of watching what my blade is doing really intensely, so that way it doesn't try to catch it. And I'll just like move my blade around and make sure that it doesn't catch it. You'll have more success if you do it by laying flat, but this is another acceptable way. So that's a return. We have cut the first return. And the idea is to have the primered surface all the way around, and don't leave a nasty looking MDF fiber piece sitting out there. You know, it's standard stuff for carpentry. Never leave a rough cut edge. You always want it to have a nice finish to it. Everything has to wrap around. So that piece we had already marked out. Or maybe we hadn't. So this is the piece that I'm cutting a return out of. So I'm just going to plunge alongside of it. I went a little bit too short on it, but oh well. Watch your hands as you're grabbing the return. Your saw blade will still be turning, so be very, very careful, and it might be a better idea to just let it stop before you reach back there. I do it without thinking because I do this all the time. So I'm going to rough cut my piece about what I need. Go ahead and take it over there. We're going to make a mark. We'll make one mark. Butt it right up against the skirt board. Now we're going to make a mark on the edge with the miter. Now we'll know that we just need to cut directly up to the edge of that board with a 46-degree cut in order to get a return cut. See, I'm just budging my board along as I'm making my plunges. We're going to variate our saw the other way to 23.5 degrees because we're cutting those bullnose corners. Here, I'm just going to leave that. That's that piece cut. And that's cutting a return. We're going to finish out this casing to casing butt cut. Go ahead and make a dry fit mark, and then it'll always just fit right in there, just like you need it. Never any fumbling with a tape measure, writing things down, subtracting things. It doesn't need to happen. There's a better way. Excuse me while I move some tools out of the way. So one thing to note here is how far your drywall is coming down as you're measuring things. But this, I'm just doing a rough cut. I'm getting a rough measurement. Looks like, 140 inches should do, that kind of thing. Just pop it right up there and make a rough cut without having to write anything down. That way you're not wasting any extra trim. That kind of thing. So I'm going to mark my rough cut. there at 133.5 inches. Here we've got our rough cut done. I didn't quite get all the way finished with that cut, so I had to recut it. Didn't quite get my saw revved up as much as I needed to. Alright, now we make our mark right there where the bull nose starts. We'll head on back to the saw and make a 23.5 degree cut at that mark. Those material supports are a really great thing to have. I don't know how I'd do this without the material supports. Those I bought at Harbor Freight. They're not exactly the best in the business. I've actually broken one before working for somebody else, but they are what they are. They're not so bad. You can always weld it back together if you have that skill too. Alright, so now we're going to dry fit this corner. Actually, we have to cut our third piece in there. So we're going to go ahead and dry fit the return on there and see with our tape measure about how much we need. I think it's going to be 3/4 usually. There, I've got my return flipped around, so I'm just going to get that in place so everything looks right. Dry fitting is a bit tedious sometimes. However, it's like the best way to make sure everything fits good before you get down on your knees and start nailing base. Nailing baseboard is a very tedious task. So you want to save yourself from having to do any work down there. Just dry fitting and making. You don't want to have to run back to the saw is the main thing. Getting up off your knees and getting back to the saw, well, it's just not productive for one, and for two, it kind of hurts. Every time you get up off your knees, your knees start to hurt more, I think. It's just better to stay on your knees, get all the way through without having to get up. There, we got it set. We're going to do a 23.5 degree miter. Actually need the other side. There we go. Now we'll use our tape measure. See, I'm using the tape measure based on the 1 inch mark, right? So you get that 5/8 offset from 1. So it'd be 1 5/8 is where I'm making my mark, but I have the first thing, the reference point is from the 1 inch mark on the tape measure. That's a trick I use all the time. It turns your tape measure basically into a ruler, so you don't have to worry about that metal tab at the end that we use to help you measure against drywall, hook on things, all kinds of stuff. The way those work is when you hook on something, it pulls that metal tab, just the thickness of the metal tab. That's the way they work. And then when you push, it pushes in the thickness of that metal tab, so it completely negates the thickness of the metal tab, so that you don't have to worry about it. Okay, we're just going to go ahead and get this corner dry fit and cut. Go ahead and make our little mark there. Cut it at a 23.5-degree miter. Just set everything in place. There I'm seeing it's maybe a bit long, but we're going to see how it works with the next pieces. No, I'm going to trim it actually. Okay, now we're going to grab ourselves a full piece. Go ahead and slap it right up on the material support. Okay, now we're gonna take a rough cut measurement for this wall. Get it back in that corner, see what we got. Looks about like what, 140 something. 130 should do the trick. So we're going to give ourselves a good side, one good side. That means we got to cut one side. And you can see that's going to have some damage. I'm going to put that towards the floor. Once it's all down there towards the floor, then it won't matter. So just keep your orientation in mind, how you want to orient your board. You can save a lot of headache for lumber suppliers and builders and yourself and other people, painters. You can save them all a bunch of time just by noticing damage. That's a lot of what I'm doing while I'm doing this. I'm keeping my eyes on the trim and make sure that there's no damage, because when they ship trim, there's a 23.5 inch or 23.5 degree miter. But there's always a little bit of damage on pretty much anything that the lumber yard ships to you. So just keep an eye out for it. Something will be damaged in the house, and if you don't hide it well, then it will be visible, and then it'll be your fault, not the lumber yard. Okay, now we're noticing maybe that one's a little long too, so we're going to put it back up on the saw. We're going to remedy that. I don't know honestly how it got long, but no matter. Sometimes stuff happens. It shouldn't be long. Maybe what happened was I had it butted farther into the drywall, maybe a little too far, who knows. But here we're going to cut off probably 3/16 or maybe a 1/4 inch with a 23.5 degree miter. Go ahead and slip it back in place, and then we'll cut the corner piece. To cut that corner piece, we'll take our smallest piece of, decently sized trim. Anything that's really small is a hazard to cut. I mean, and once you get to a small size piece, I mean, your hands are going to be right next to that saw blade. It's never going to be safe. No matter what you do, it's not going to be the safest thing to do. And it's also definitely not going to be smart. So here we've found one that we've already made. Looks great. So we're not going to worry about that. Not every corner will be the same. With those bullnose corners, you can see one of them just didn't line up with that piece and one of them did. So take that for what it is. It's just drywall being different. Drywall is just it's a really nice looking fireproof covering. Well, not completely fireproof, but all right. So we've got, it looks like 78 and 11/16 there. So we're gonna go ahead and cut ourselves a piece at 78 and 11/16. I'm just gonna triple check my measurement, make sure I got it right. Who wants to go back to the saw, really? But see how I did that? I'm even measuring pieces as I go, and then I go make a cut on them, and I just remember my measurement in the back of my mind. That board's too short. We're gonna have to cut it out of the full piece. So always have one of these handy. Just pop off the cellophane. And be careful with your knife too. Your carpenter's knife is one of the most used tools. It's also the thing that will hurt you the most. I mean, and by that I mean statistically, not the severity of injuries. The severity of injuries, the table saw takes the cake. But most of the time you're getting hurt by your knife. Let's just be honest. Most of the time you're going to cut yourself with your knife on accident rather than a saw blade. But what we need to be always thinking about is where our hands are. Notice while I'm cutting, I do not cross my arms on the saw. I never cross hands. If I keep one hand, my left hand on the left side of the saw, and I keep my right hand on the right side of the saw, no matter what. See, now I'm grabbing the saw with my left. Now the tendency is to grab it with your right, cross your arms, and put your left hand on, because your dominant hand wants to be the one that cuts, that does all the cutting. But you have to keep your hands in the orientation that they are normally, because if you cross your arms on the saw, it's insanely dangerous. Or maybe not insanely dangerous, but it's unnecessarily dangerous. Any man can, or woman can, learn how to, use your arms like that. It's something that's not hard to learn, but it is hard to make yourself do it. But it's incredibly important. Not only for safety, but also speed of production. So now we have a two-piece wall here. So we're going to have to put two pieces spliced together in order to get it done. This is just some dunnage and packing material that came on some doors. I'm just getting it off the floor. I just cut it into smaller pieces so it fits in my trash can better. Next up, we're going to grab a full piece, give it a good side. good side. Check it for damage before we put it up against the wall. That's what I'm doing as I'm feeding that board, is looking for any place where the primer is damaged in any way. Okay, we're going to get it up underneath that cord and back into butt against the drywall. We'll just from here I've got a piece of some ripped casing that was preventing me from getting it flush against the drywall. Okay, we'll get that into place, and then we're going to cut another full piece to go to that wall. It looks like we'll be able to get this wall done in 2 pieces. However, sometimes you will need 3. I've even done a full 4-piece wall one time. It was just a crazy long closet, and basically went the span of the whole house in four full 16-foot pieces nearly. It was kind of amazing to me. Okay, you can see here we're going to set the 2 pieces up against the drywall. Make sure everything is butted in the corners. So I'm going to go kick it right into place. I know that other corner is butted in the drywall over there. So I'm going to grab my stud finder. The stud finder I use is Precision, I believe, brand. I have one listed in the description. I would encourage, if you don't or have this or have never used one and didn't like it or whatever, try it out. It is a great piece of equipment. So you'll see 3 little lights come up there. Those little lights show you exactly where your stud is. So then I just set it against the floor to make a 90-degree line. And then I'm going to check that line. Make sure it's marking the center of this stud. The center of the stud is where we need our mark, because we're going to be nailing this base on to that same stud from both sides. So it's going to be at opposing angles, angling into that stud on either side. And that'll be how we complete this spliced joint. This is what we call it. This is a splice joint. So I'm going to take this on over, and I'm going to do a 22.5 degree. I believe this one will be the outside miter. So it'd be a 23.5 degree outside miter, just like all the other boards we've cut for a corner. It's going to be an outside miter. Now the other board will be an inside miter to accept that outside miter, and that one will use a lesser degree. So that'll be 21.5 degree miter. And the idea of that is it will tighten things up. I'm going to go ahead and make my dry fit mark, take it on over to the saw, and then I'm going to cut it at a 21.5 degree miter. Now I'm just being very careful to not bump the drywall with the board, as this house is pretty much finished painted already. It's not my favorite scenario, but it is what it is. So there you can see I'm cutting an inside miter at 21.5 degrees. When you're doing these splice joints, you want to use a 22.5 degree cut, or with the 1 degree each way. Less for an inside, more for an outside, but just by 1 degree. So that'll give it a chance to tighten up. So I'm going to slip that inside miter on the back, and then I'll place the outside miter on the top of that and press it on back to the stud. And those are looking very good. That's a very good splice joint. Here I noticed that the drywall is not all the way to the concrete. So you don't want your tape measure to slip down there. So I put that piece of base down there for a good reason. It'll pop your tape measure up a 1/2 inch and keep it from going underneath that drywall and down to the stud. So here I'm marking double B's. 2 B's means 2 butt cuts with no thickness of material taken out. You'll see me write TOM on this next one. So what that's going to do is when I get to the saw, I'll remember I need to subtract the thickness of material. So this is a little bit under 173 inches. So what I'm going to do is make a minus sign. The minus sign tells me to shave off about a 32nd of an inch. We're going to go ahead and stick that right in that corner. This room, I'm noticing that the drywall goes basically down to the concrete, so I'm not worried about putting my baseboard scratch pad in the corner there. I'm just more worried about getting it done quickly. So I'm going to put TOM for thickness of material here, because that's butting into another board. Also with this next one, it'll be butting into that other wall that I just measured, so it needs a thickness of material taken out as well. Any place your baseboard is hitting another piece of baseboard, it's probably going to need a thickness of material subtracted. There we go. Let's measure it directly up to the casing. So we got 134.5 with thickness of material on the right side and a butt cut on the other side. Because every time you go into a casing, it's going to be a butt cut. Every time you're going against drywall, it's going to be a butt cut. And then every time you're going against another piece of baseboard, it's going to be thickness of material. Unless that baseboard is already in place and you're measuring up to it, then you don't have to subtract anything, but I think you already know that. I don't know why, but I'm going to go ahead and remeasure that. Maybe I wasn't confident in my measurement. But if you're ever not confident about how you measured something, it's just better to check it. So now we're going to go ahead and cut that room. So we're going to go ahead and put a full piece up there. and straighten that up on the fence and make sure everything's tight to the fence and flat on the table. Just roll it right along those material supports, shoot your tape out, and go ahead and make yourself a mark at your first cut. Looks like this one's at 144 1/4 or something like that. So we'll just go ahead and give it a cut flat on the table. You'll notice that I have boards sitting on the front of my saw there. Those are great material supports to have for cutting baseboard. You can stack up like a small bathroom or something like that on there before you go take it in that small bathroom. You have everything in an order, and you just go spread it out throughout the room. Simple as pie. There we've got our first piece cut. We're on back for the next. We're going to give ourselves a good side. Here I'm showing you TOM, thickness of material. So that is the thickness of material. So in order to use that, we just make our mark like normal, drywall to drywall measurement, and then we use the center part of that baseboard. See, I've got it lined up on my mark. Boom. That's your thickness of material. No math needed, just make a second mark and it's done. So don't fret if you're a trim carpenter and you just need to do baseboard and you're worried about, your math skills. Don't worry about it anymore. Just pick up this tip. It'll keep you from having these blunders where you accidentally come in with a board that's way too long or short, and people get mad, and some people may laugh, some people may cry. Now it won't happen anymore. That's a perfect tension on that board, I think I was saying. That's you want it to have a little spring to it where everything will tighten up, but not too much. A little more bow than that, and you'd want to recut the board. There, we're paying attention to where's the butt cut and where's the thickness of material, and memorizing the measurement. Now we're going to get a good side on this board. Go ahead and cut it flat. Zip it back up on the material support. Shoot your tape out. Hook it right on there. Then we're going to make our mark at 144.5 there. We're going to take out our thickness of material piece, and we're going to line up that center part and make a little, scribe a little line on there. Cut it directly along that line to cut out the thickness of material. Then we'll go ahead and take it right in there and dry fit it. Here I'm noticing that there is some damage, so I'm going to want to put that facing the floor. You see that damage, I'm sure. That'll go along the floor, and I'm getting it in place to make sure that it does. It would have been easier to carry that board in the other way and put that facing up, but since there is damage, you need to get that facing down. So I bring it in that way. We're going to go ahead and kick this board back in the corner. Make sure everything's flush against your drywall right where you need it for dry fitting. These boards are about as tight as you'd want to get them. Maybe a little tighter could work, you know, but there's a tolerance for how tight things can be. You will stretch drywall and you will ruin it sometimes if you're not careful. So don't try and slam boards in between, you know, two other boards just because you're getting tired and you don't want to go back to your saw. You don't want to cause damage just because you were a little tired and didn't want to go back to your saw. Always trim anything that needs trimmed, and don't try and get away with slamming it into place. You'll just create a bigger mess, I guarantee it. Alright, we'll make our mark there. And we'll take our thickness of material piece. There's one. Be very, very careful taking this in here, just like every time. Definitely try not to damage anything moving your baseboard through the house. It's hard, but taking your time, it's not intensely hard. It's just time consuming mainly. But most places you're working, if your baseboard kind of grazes against the wall, leaves a little scratch, it's not going to matter that much. Builders expect the trimmer to come in and kind of mess up the drywall a little bit. It's expected. But if it's too much, believe me, you'll hear about it. So there we've got a mark for the dry fit on that mitered corner. That's going to be another bullnose corner. The bathroom was no exception. Everything down here is bullnosed. So we're going to do a 23.5 degree miter. Now we're going to give ourselves a flat edge to make our dry fits. Get ourselves a line there right on the bullnose. I probably could have done that centerpiece right there as well, but it's so close to my saw, I just keep my brain oriented on what piece I'm working on. It won't take me but a second to walk right back to the saw. And that's like a huge thing. If you can get your saw closer to where you're working, most of the time it is worth it to do so. You don't want to be running all over the house to do stuff. I mean, the more you get, the more you do this, the better you get at it, the least amount of recuts you'll need. So you can pretty much count on your measurements to be about right, and you won't really need your saw to be right next to where you're working for dry fitting. But I find dry fitting is probably faster than measuring and marking everything out. I don't know if it's a lot faster, but I think it's just a little bit at least faster, and it's always a good fit when you dry fit. So I think in the end that makes it better in all, just dry fitting. So we're going to try this piece on that corner. We're just going to see about what it looks like. We're not going to spend a lot of time dry fitting with just one piece. We'll see how it looks when I get that into place. Looks good. Now we'll go ahead and dry fit another piece. Now you notice I'm actually not even measuring anything. That's not something most people will be able to do, but lo and behold, I didn't measure that piece at all, but looky there. If it ain't perfect, I don't know what it is. So next up, we're gonna go ahead and get that wall that is right in front of me. Just get that tile out of the way. That's the tile that will be installed in this bathroom. Go ahead and get it. This piece was a little bit small, so we'll need to get a slightly larger piece. There we got it, about 60 3/4 inches it looked like. So we'll go ahead and cut that directly where we need it. It's not always necessary to run back and forth to the saw. Sometimes you can just cut it directly where you need it, but I think for mitered corners, dry fitting is the best. That looks maybe a bit long. See, that's why dry fitting is often the best option. Here I am cutting another 1/16 of an inch off this board so that I don't have to slam it into that casing, and then it'll budge the casing over, and it causes a whole host of issues. Sometimes it'll actually budge your door over, and then it'll close up your gaps. Depends on how well fastened your door is, that kind of thing. So now we'll go ahead and grab, we're going to need a piece to go between those two boards against that back wall. There will be a cabinet back there, but I want to go ahead and have a piece of base back there just in case they ever want to move that cabinet out. Alright, so we're going to measure that. Make sure it's all butted directly up against the drywall. This was a really tough place to measure because it's at the end of a small, tiny hallway, basically. It's like working in a tiny box. Alright, there we got our measurement. We'll go ahead and cut this board. This will be the last piece for the cutting the baseboard. I want to thank everybody for watching. Please like, share, comment, subscribe. I've got a lot of tools listed in the description, mainly that stud finder somebody might find useful. Just go ahead and pick it up through the link. We really appreciate that. It directly supports me. Thank you all for watching. Have a beautiful day.